Hello, welcome to part 3 of the lecture on imperialism. Today we are covering imperialism in Asia. So let's jump right into it. So we're going to be starting out with the Qing Dynasty that is established in 1644 and continues on until China turns into a republic in 1912. Now, you could see they owned a lot of territory off and on throughout their entire existence. However, although they are the last ruling dynasty of China, they were not Chinese according to the tradition of Han Chinese. They were Manchu. So they were Manchurian. So for many, they were seen as foreigners. They were highly integrated, though, into Chinese culture. They're not like the Mongols were when they were ruling. They have a Chinese administration. They are ruling and acting and culturally like the Chinese. Now, one thing that you might be able to recognize somebody from like the time period is that this was when they would have men shave their head and combine just a strip of hair in the back into a queue. And you would be having that. So that braided pony down the back with a shaved head. So they allowed Europeans to trade until they felt threatened. And so that is when they started to try to expel them from China, but it seems to be that they were too late in doing so. So when they go in and conquer China in 1636, they restored peace and stability. And like other new dynasties in the past, they pushed for a recovery and expansion of the agricultural economy. The Chinese population will double between 1650 and 1800. And that's due to a whole bunch of numerous reasons. But with that, you start having a population pressure in 1800. So we're having environmental damage and contribution of an increased number of farmhands, itinerant farmhands, laborers, and merchants. And so we're starting to have some issues there. There were several sources of discontent also. Various minority people had been driven off of their land, and many people disregarded the government as being, or regarded the government as being weak and corrupt. Now, we do have the beginning of the Europeans coming in. So we have Emperor Kangxi, who reigned from 1662 until 1722. He started reigning at the age of 7 because his dad died of smallpox. He has the longest reign in Chinese history. And he brings about the zenith point of their society, their economics, and their political power under this dynasty. He is the one who goes and leads campaigns in numerous areas, expanding the borders, and he had a new dictionary written. He also had a collection of the old Tang poets compiled together. Now, he is also the one, though, that invited Jesuit missionaries to run an observatory to do some governmental work, and this is the start of the European push into China. And from there, as time moves on, but primarily when the 1800s hit, we have other powers trying to come in. In the 1800s, we have Russia, Germany, Britain, France, and then we start later on, as time moves on, having Japan in 1905, and also America even wondering if they could get in there with a slice. So that's going to be a problem. Now, trade between Britain and China. Prior to the 1800s, China experienced a trade surplus. They're constantly exporting goods. Everybody wants Chinese goods. This is another reason for why Europeans are trying to find direct routes to China, to India, to all of these places that has so much that they want. So silver and gold flowed into China from Europe and Japan. The Industrial Revolution and China's political decline would open the door for other powers to exert more power influence into the country. In the late 1700s, many Chinese became addicted to something that Britain finally found that it can sell to China. That's opium. So in India, Britain found opium, and they did not want to bring this powerful narcotic to Great Britain because of what they saw that it could possibly do. And so instead, they brought it to China. And so the British supplied the opium. And China eventually, once they also realized the danger, called to stop the trade. And Britain refused, which is going to usher in the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars are also known as the Anglo-Chinese Wars. There's going to be two of them. The first one is going to be fought from 1839 to 1842, and the second from 1856 to 1860. So it's going to pit China versus the United Kingdom. When the Chinese passed laws against opium use and trade, the British continued to smuggle it into the country. They're kind of the drug dealers, which eventually does lead to a war. The British did not want to import opium into Great Britain because they saw that it was a dangerous drug. And so, jumping into this, when the conflict was fought, Great Britain simply has better war tech, which is the problem for China. And so China is going to lose, and they're going to be signing the Treaty of Nanking or Treaty of Nanjing. They're known as the unequal treaties. And they're signed giving Britain the rights to expand trade with China and the right to create more opium addicts. With this, the Qing dynasty loses influence in Southeast Asia, losing tributary states to Europeans and the Japanese. Vietnam falls under the French in 1886, Burma under Great Britain in 1885, and other various locations, as you can see, Korea, Taiwan, Liaodong Peninsula to Japan in 1895. And so, what is going on with this Treaty of Nanking? Well, the big thing is the right of foreign residents in a foreign country to live under the laws of their home country and disregard the laws of the host country is part of the treaty. That's a big thing. So, if you are British, you can sell opium in China, even though it is against the law in China to sell opium. That's a problem. Indemnity is put in there, exemption from incurred penalties or liabilities. And then the most favored nation status. Any privileges granted to another country are automatically extended. That also is a problem for China. So this is a bad treaty. And this is going to start bringing about the end of the dynasty. So China's defeat in both wars forced the government to tolerate opium trade. The United Kingdom forced the Qing government to open several ports to foreign trade and yielded Hong Kong to Britain. We now have rebellions going against the foreign powers and also the government. We have the Taiping Rebellion, which was the most devastating peasant revolt in history and caused the death of 20 to 30 million Chinese and forced the Qing to share power with regional commanders. And we also have the Boxer Rebellion that lasted from 1899 to 1901. The Boxer Rebellion was an anti-Manchu, anti-European, and anti-Christian rebellion led by the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, aka the Boxers. Empress Dowager Cixi supported the Boxers militia, and so fighting broke out in 1899. They used guerrilla warfare tactics and slaughtered Christian missionaries and seized foreign embassies. The militia members were misled to believe that European weapons would not harm them. If you believe hard enough, the bullets cannot penetrate you. So, yes, obviously believing that if you believe hard enough, the bullets cannot penetrate you is not going to help you win because guess what? They're going to penetrate you and you're gonna die. So 140,000 Boxers besiege European embassies in 1900. And now, because we have anybody who is basically Christian or European or Manchu or whatever are being killed, the world responds to this rebellion. So it is crushed by a coalition of European, Japanese, and American forces. It's not just like the British going in now, like what we had in the Opium Wars. This is a coalition of a whole bunch going in. And then the United States, the Europeans, and the Japanese all forced China to pay for the cost of the rebellion. And now China was also forced to accept the stationing of foreign troops. So they are showing that they really are not even in control of their own country anymore. And the spheres of influence, the other countries coming in to China grows and grows and grows and grows. And others are looking at growing even more, including Imperial Japan. So, Japan, the last time we talked about them in class, they had shut the door to the outside world, only allowing trade at the port of Nagasaki with China and the Netherlands. That was it, mainly because, you need some outside goods, especially rice, to be able to keep your country afloat. So, yeah, for Japan, the Tokugawas shut the door. And so they were highly ethnocentric and isolationist. Citizens were not allowed to travel abroad. But then in 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry and all of his friends arrived on a steamboat in Japan. And now this showed that we were kind of at a different technological level because we had ironclad ships and they didn't. They had wood ships. And they looked at basically just the difference of technology and they kind of went, uh-oh. And so they sign a treaty with the United States, and obviously the treaty is favoring the US. But nationalists in Japan are angry and they rise up against the shogun who goes and establishes this treaty and signs it. And so they now restore power to the emperor, Meiji, dethroning the last shogun. And Japan then went to go see what's been going on with the rest of the world. They sent people to China to see what the outside powers were doing and saw that they needed to modernize quickly so they don't follow the same road as China with foreign intervention. They then sent people to Europe to learn how to initiate their own industrial revolution, which they did, and they were able to industrialize in 50 years, a process that took Europe over 250 years. But since Japan is just copying and pasting, it's a lot quicker to just copy and paste than to write it from the start. And so they're able to industrialize in a very short period of time. And so, reflecting about what is going on in China, a Japanese official wrote, the Chinese have become servants to the foreigners. Sovereignty may belong to China, but in fact, it's no more than a colony of Great Britain or France. And so, talking about the Meiji Revolt, well, I'm taking out the shogun because I breezed over that. So, they felt that foreigners were attacking the traditional ways and values of Japan. And they believed that Japan was sacred ground. If you look at Shintoism, yes, Japan, the ground itself, is sacred. Nature is sacred. They also felt that the emperor was a godlike figure. So they had revere the emperor, expel the barbarian as a slogan at the time period. And so we have Sakamoto Ryama, who comes in as the hero, helped Japan emerge from feudalism into a unified modern state. So the shogun is out, the emperor is in, and Westerners are out again, just not 100%. Now, Japan is taking in, like what they did in the past, just selectively borrowing items. They bring in the metric system, clocks, calendar, fashion that came from the West, but they don't accept any of the Western religions. They're not going and accepting Christianity. And now we are going to see, after this 50-year modernization, how good is Japan? And we have that with the Russo-Japanese War. And it will be seen that Japan has obviously outpaced even Russia in their industrial revolution. In 1876, the samurai class was abolished and universal military service was established. And in 1890, they were able to reduce European and United States influence in their country and area. On the Meiji Imperial victories, 1895, they defeated China to take control of Korea and Taiwan. And of course, what I was just talking about in 1904, the Russo-Japanese War helped Japan show itself to the outside world as a major power. And they kicked Russia out of Manchuria and established their own sphere of influence there. Japan was now a growing imperial power. And so, with reforms within their own country, they did land redistribution. They brought in a westernized education system, a new banking system, a written constitution that include human rights and religious freedom, emperor worship, and modern and industrialized navy and army. So, Western culture starts to be seen in Japan, but not in all areas. And so, if you just look at this painting alone, you see somebody still in traditional Japanese garb, surrounded by people with Western style uniforms. So that is Japan at this period of time. You have that complexity. So comparing and contrasting the Industrial Revolution in Europe and Japan, Japan was faster, a few decades to Europe's century. They helped when all you need. It helps when all you need to do is copy and paste. And Japan didn't have to invent, only implement. Old samurai families focused on building private corporations. So, like the Mitsubishis are going to become quite wealthy with their factories and what they are producing. So, we're going to be seeing the first Sino-Japanese War. It is fought 1894 to 1895, and this is going against the last dynasty of China. And that is when they are going to be taking control of areas including Korea, the Korean Peninsula, Taiwan, and other places. And it is a decisive victory for Japan. They have the better technology going into this and better practice. And Japan is going to formally annex Korea in 1910, and they are going to have a very brutal reign over Korea during this time period. It's something that we'll be talking more about when we go to the interwar period and to the buildup for World War II. But yes, Korea is now 100% under the hands of Japan. So, this is the end of the lecture on imperialism in Asia. If you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you very much. Bye bye.